And we are back with another outstanding episode, Square Table Degenerates. Today we are joined by Mr. Iain Baker, keyboardist for the English rock band Jesus Jones. How are you today, sir?
I'm really good, man. You?
I'm doing pretty good, man. Like I said, it's Sunday. This week was hectic. It was just with my regular job and whatnot, but it's been all right, man. It's finally getting into April here.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie though. Yesterday, like all the April Fool's Day jokes, I'm over it. Like none of them are funny anymore. Somebody posts something that's clearly not real, and it's like, whatever.
Yeah. when you're a kid, that sort of thing's amazing. When you're like 10 years old, it's the coolest stuff in the world. And then when you're about 12, you think this probably isn't actually all that cool. And every single year that goes past after that, it just goes like downhill. Yeah, ever since then. So
once the internet came out, that just ruined all the April Fool's Day stuff because you could just easily go online and do it. And then there was 10 years or so where it was still fun, but then I'm over it. We're all over it.
Yeah, agreed.
Are you the real? All right, so the internet tells me you were born in Carshalton. Did I get that right? Is that how I say it?
Yeah, Carshalton. Yeah, it's just down the road from where I live. Actually, here I'm in Epsom, which is in Surrey. Just kind of, if everybody imagines like that's London, yeah, that's that kind of picture of London. I'm kind of down there, about there, right in the bottom corner. Yeah.
Okay, so you're in the South hot part down there.
Yeah.
So what did you do for fun when you were running around as a wee lad and back in the days of yore in the the Beatles era and the early 70s and all that?
Oh man, I did. I just listened to music constantly. I skated a lot. When I was about 10 or 11 years, I picked up a skateboard, and that's been a kind of constant companion for me ever since. I've skated for like the whole of my life. So yeah, I spent a lot of my youth just stuck to a skateboard all the time. That was quite a good escape for me. Taught me a lot about my life. Taught me a lot about skating's a weird thing. I mean, it's not just about learning how to skate. Skating teaches you how to kind of how to visualize the world, how to sort of place yourself into context with the rest of the world. And I think that for a kid, when you're 11, 12 years old, learning those things about yourself is just amazing. It's just amazing. So like, I suppose it's the same for people that surf. Surfers are much the same when they say, you watch people surf. It's not so much about the tricks they do. It's about that sort of relationship that they have with the ocean. It's like they're trying to commune with the thing that they're reacting to all the time. And it's the same thing with a skater. When you pick it up for the first time, it's just that buzz you get of suddenly doing something different than walking along a flat surface. It's just this, it places yourself in the world in a totally different way. So I think that shaped a lot of my youth, man, for sure. Absolutely. I looked at things a different way once I saw it when I was running around on four wheels.
Now, did you being a skateboarder? That's early skateboard culture, like here in the States, man. Like, I mean, they had it in like California in the 70s, maybe, but like...
Yeah, 76, 77, that's when I started, So it's early, it's proper, like, early.
Now, were there, like, skate shops back then? Did you have to make your own board? What was the, how did you even do it back then? I mean, it's such an early thing.
It was, yeah, I mean, when we started, it was very much like kind of the craze years, so everybody had little polyprop boards, they called them, which are those like red plastic, yellow plastic boards. I mean, now they come back and they're penny boards, they're like hip again. But back then it was just plastic tat that you bought from shops for, I don't know, like $15 or something like that. And you just kind of skated around on them. But there wasn't, so initially you could buy them from the English equivalent of places like Target and Walmart. But obviously we had those shops on a very much smaller scale than you guys do. And then within about a year, the actual skate shops started turning up. So real shops. And then, of course, that first wave of skating, late 70s, it only lasted about 2 years, a year and a half, 2 years. And then it just died hard. And then it came back. Well, it didn't come back, but it went underground big time. It went underground. So, from there being like 400,000 kids that skated in the UK, all of a sudden, when it died, there was like 400 kids in the whole country. And it's like everybody knew everybody else. And still to this day, there are kids that I know on Facebook who were skating in 1980, 1981, because you all stuck together. It was something that you all still had. And then it came back again in, I don't know, 86, 80, 87, something like that. And by then, weirdly, I was actually working in a skateboard shop. There's a skateboard shop in London called Slam City Skates, which is probably the biggest and most influential skateboard shop in London at the time. And I got a job there, and I was managing the skate shop. So that was great. Watching it come back again was fantastic. And weirdly, that's where I met Mike the singer from Jesus Jones, and how I ended up in the band. So skateboarding sort of started my childhood off, and then it weirdly ended up putting me in a position where I got a job in a rock band.
I was going to ask you about that. What kind of shoes were you rocking there? Was it like Vans? Was it Chucks? What was your footwear?
Yeah, Converse. Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, so Chucks, Converse. Everybody wrote over here Converse, and the reason for that is that like you could get Vans, but they were really, really expensive. I mean, really expensive. So, and this is back in the day when a dollar was, it's not like a pound was $2. So if those shoes were, if a pair of Vans were like $20 in the US, they'd be like 40 quid or something here in the UK, which at the time is an insane amount of money to pay on shoes. Everywhere else you could get a pair of sneakers for like a quarter of that. So Vans were insanely expensive. And of course, Vans were made for use in beautifully smooth American skateboard parks. And also they were made for use on beautifully smooth American sidewalks. And so if you had a pair of Vans, which you'd spent like 3 months money on, and you took them out onto English roads and English sidewalks, you'd chew them up in a couple of months and they'd be dead. So that's why we all wore Converse, because you could at least replace them. Although we didn't replace them, we all had, you wrap gaffer, you use them until they started to fall apart, and then you started wrapping gaffer tape around them. I used to use them until they just started to fall apart, and then just keep sellotaping them back up together again.
What kind of kicks you rocking now?
Mostly Vans. Mostly Vans. Vans old school, which is the kind of low top traditional Vans. Anything with the that still has that waffle sole, it has to have the waffle sole. Otherwise, it never quite feels like Vans to me. You can get other Vans that are mostly just like buying a pair of Nikes, but as an old school skater, right, that doesn't work for me. I have to have that waffle sole. Otherwise, I just feel weird.
Now, it is no secret that obviously the UK is a lot more compact, and you were alluding to the no sidewalks. Like, yeah. I remember skating. I've never been a skater. I have no coordination, but I've always been fascinated by it. I love skateboard culture. Like back in the 80s, people would skate down the streets, stand on skate, sidewalks and whatnot. Where did you get? I mean, you obviously were in the London metro, so that's probably easy to find stuff. But like, were you guys fascinated at all with like American skate culture? Like, when did you become privy to any of the like Tony Hawk and the mid 80s stuff like that? Was that ever on your guys' radar? Was there skate magazine?
Yeah, there wasn't ever a point where it wasn't on our radar. I mean, everything was on our radar. And as a kid growing up, I think it's weird. You'd be surprised. Like English kids knew more about American skate culture than you'd probably expect. And that's because our only lifeline to skateboarding, and especially American skateboarding, was was magazines, things like that. So, you know, we'd see just stopped motion photos of kids doing maneuvers in skate parks in California. And so you'd see a guy at the top of a ramp, or you'd see a picture of Tony Alva doing an air, and that's all you had to go on. So it was weird. So you had to try and replicate these things you had to replicate moving tricks from things which are frozen in time. That's all you had to go on. So it was weird. These things, so these people that we idolize, you know, Alva and what have you, Stacy Peralta, they seemed real, but at the same time, you'd never seen them in the flesh, or you'd never really seen them move. There was the occasional clips that we saw on TV news programs, but that was about it. And all of that changed in the mid 80s when skate companies like Powell Peralta started releasing skate videos, and then you actually saw them. You actually saw those people for the first time and saw them skate. And that's why skate videos, when they first came around in the mid 80s, I think the first one was the Powell Peralta video show. And then obviously you had things like Animal Chin. That was one of the biggest things that drove the resurgence in skating. It's why skating is massive now, is a bunch of videos that effectively Stacy Peralta made, because they gave kids all around the world the ability to see what skateboarding was like and how you did those tricks and those maneuvers. Before it, you had no idea. You had no idea what this stuff looked like. And this is obviously in an era before the internet. Nowadays, kids, you can if you want to emulate your favorite skate, you just get up a YouTube video and see what he looks like, and then bang, you can practice those maneuvers, rewind it, see how he does it, see his style. Back then, everybody was flying blind. So it was an interesting time. But flying blind, of course, is exciting, because it means that whatever you do everything you do is a voyage into the unknown. Every step you make is a new step, a fresh step, your own step. And that's, I think, why skateboarding at the time was so creative and so interesting to be involved in, because every day was something new.
That's awesome, man. I was just studying, and I didn't realize how into the skateboarding was. Now, it took off. I mean, we have to acknowledge the internet. I mean, like you said, and for me, it was the Tony Hawk series. I mean, that guy. I mean, I kind of, because like, I mean, I watched the video games, and you see people do it here or there, and maybe tricks every now and then. But man, when you saw Tony Hawk, you saw Bergquist, and you know, obviously Hawk himself, and then do the 900, and then do all these crazy tricks. You just get addicted to watching the videos. To this day, I've never. I think I've been on a skateboard 4 times, but I've probably seen millions of hours, thousands of hours of skateboarding footage, just because of it's just everywhere now. Like you said, it's awesome.
I mean, I think Hawk's power, you know, and the things he did, you can't ever underestimate those, because he did so much for the sport. And like you say, he made it interesting, obviously, for people that were involved in skating, but he also made it interesting, like you alluded to, for people maybe like yourself who don't really skate but can get a buzz out of it, you know, and he took it to those people as well. So, you know, that's awesome. You know, I mean, I think the guy was so important, so important.
Now, you being into skateboarding, did that preclude you from being like Premier League fan and stuff like that? Did you follow any of the team sports?
I was always a Chelsea fan, still am a Chelsea fan. That happened since, I guess, about 1970, when I was at primary school. So yeah, I followed Chelsea ever since then. And actually, to the point where I moved to West London. I spent a lot of my late teen years and most of the time throughout the Jones years as well in West London. So I was a Chelsea season ticket holder pretty much until I had a family, and it was just impossible to get away on Saturdays all the time and watch games. So yeah, I was a resident of the Matthew Harding upper stand, North Stand upper at Chelsea at Stamford Bridge, which was amazing. I just love the place. I'd love to go back, but it's yes, when you got kids and stuff, it's just finding the time.
It is. I got kids myself, and it's like, you know, there's so much stuff I want to do, but like stuff I could do is maybe like once or twice a week. You know, yeah. I love to go on the road and, you know, I'm going to tour for 4 weeks in comedy, but it's like, you know, at the end of the day, who's going to take the kids? You know, the wife can pick them up, but you know, she's going to get sick of me being on the road all the time.
Yeah. Well, hey, welcome to our world. People say people say, "Oh, okay, when is Jesus Jones going to do like an 8-week tour of the world?" And that's why we're not, because all our wives are going to be like, "Well, hang on a minute, who's picking the kids up?" So you got to try and navigate around that one, which is something that you don't expect when you get into the world of rock and roll.
Right now, going back way back, what did your parents do for a living? What was your like that part? Like, what were your
My mother was
influences?
a nurse. My father was he worked in education, adult education. So he worked for the Royal Air Force in adult education. But he was a musician too. So he was a guitarist. He played guitar for sort of semi-professional jazz bands, a lot of trad jazz. And that was my first exposure to music. And I think they always wanted me to be musical. So, when I was a kid, I started to learn the piano and I started to learn the saxophone, a couple of things, but I was never that good at being a musician, which is weird because that's been a career of mine, but I wasn't really that good as a musician. So that was, I think my parents almost weirdly felt a little let down by that. My dad felt a little bit let down that I couldn't be a great musician. And then he probably felt even more let down that it's like, well, how come he wasn't a great musician and he still fluked a job in a band? But there we go. But, they've been endlessly supportive, so I still love them.
Now, what was your going into high school? I read you were kind of a troublemaker because of the skateboarding. Would you say? I mean, what was your reputation like?
I think I was just an outsider really because of the skateboarding thing and also because of the music thing more than anything else, just the fact that I wasn't like some of the other kids where I lived. And at that time I wasn't in London. I was outside London. I was in the West Country and right in the middle of the countryside. And I was really, really different from all of the other kids. All the other kids were just going to grow up to be farmers and they had their own little path in life sort of predetermined, and I didn't. And when I found that I was skateboarding all the time and buying and listening to punk rock records, that meant that I was even less like all of the kids in my school. So I felt very much like an outsider in a way, and it stayed that way until I moved back to London with my folks. And at that point, I discovered all the proper record shops, the proper skate parks, the proper gigs that were happening, the music scene that was going on, and that enabled me to get back into music properly. And that's why, and from that day to this, I haven't really done anything else that wasn't involved in music.
Now, I saw on this interview they said you had an arsonist phase. Now, I got to ask you about that because I kind of had the same phase, and I'll explain what I used to do. And you can tell me. I used to love things burning. Like I live in Cleveland, obviously, so like we had a bunch of garages, the houses would be foreclosed, whatever. And we would just go in there and hang out and just like burn shit. Just like, take little bubblegum wrappers, burn it, see what different colors are. Is that kind of like how you did it, or what got you into the?
Well, I'll probably get in trouble for telling people exactly what I did, but I think I got expelled from school for a week or something because I was on the verge of burning the classrooms down. So we over here, you have 2-pin sockets, right? 2-pin electrical outlets or whatever they're called. Over here, we have 3-pin sockets, like 3 pins like that, one at the top, 2 at the bottom. And then the other weird thing about so where is it? Here we go. Hang on, look. There's an English plug. See, there's an English plug. So you got one at the top and you got 2 at the bottom. And I can't remember which way it works. Maybe if this is the ground and this is the live and the new, I don't know, whatever. So in America, you just plug it in and everything works. These 2 here and everything just works. Whereas in England, everything it's grounded like that. And then you have a little switch next to the plug socket here. And you switch it on and off. So you can put this thing in, and if you plug your Hoover or your whatever, your vacuum cleaner, it won't work until you flick the switch. And so what I did was I found that if you jam a pencil into that top hole, there's 2 little bits of plastic that come up over the bottom, and then you can get into the bottom hole. So making sure the plug's off, You just put a loop of wire in those bottom two things, and then you just stand well back and flick the switch with your foot or whatever, and the plug socket blows off the wall. You're like, bang, straight off. Like, bang. And there's a huge explosion of kind of sparks and and what happens is if the piece of wire is covered in, insulated plastic covered in wire, that catches fire and runs all over the thing. But so I did this a lot to loads of classrooms in my school, because when you're 12 years old, you're not thinking about any consequences. You know what I mean? You don't think about any consequences. You don't think, oh, well, this could be dangerous, or this could result in people perhaps being hurt, or maybe this could result in damage to property, or it could have a financial. You don't think about any of that. You just go, check the flames out and look at this. This is amazing. So that was my phase. And as soon as I got hauled up before the headmaster and told in no uncertain terms that what I was doing was seriously dangerous, and promptly excluded from school for a week or so. So yeah, that was my arsonist phase. It's quite fun.
The thing that makes me think about that also too, the electrical thing, is that I remember in jail, people used to, like, if you throw pencil shavings in the electrical outlet, it supposedly starts a little fire, and they used to light their cigarettes off of that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It's amazing what sort of things fascinate people. You know what I mean? It's just, that's how it happens.
It's kind of ridiculous. Now, after high school, did you go to university, or see your dad was in the service and he thought you joining the service? What was
No, that was never for me. I went to university, yes. I went to university in the north of England in a place called Lancaster, and I studied Latin, classical Latin. So I have a degree. I have a degree in classical Latin.
Nice.
Which is utterly useless. But it wasn't a great degree. I wasn't a particularly good student. In fact, I was an awful student. I didn't do any work. I didn't do any revision. I didn't go to my exams. I didn't go to my exams. I didn't go to my exams at all. In the first year, you're supposed to do 3 subjects, right? And I can't even remember what they were. I think one was Latin, maybe one was something else, and maybe Latin archaeology and geography or something. And literally, I went to the first week. I was quite hungover, and I remember going to the first ever geography lesson, and I was really hungover. And I was in there for like the second half of the lecture. And I remember, because I was hungover, I was thinking, oh, this sucks. This is the most boring thing. And I remember walking out of the lecture hall at the end of that hour, although I only did half of it. And I remember thinking, God, that was awful. Absolutely awful. And I remember at that point thinking to myself, I'm not going to do any more of that. If it was that bad, I don't want to do anymore. So that was the first week of term. And from that point to the end of the year, I didn't do any more lessons. I just didn't bother going, because I was like, well, I hated the first one. On what planet are the next lessons going to get any more fun? And so at the end of the year, you're supposed to do an exam in geography. And then you pass that module of the degree, and then you can move on and what have you. And so I got my exam schedule through at the end of the first year, and it said, you've got to go and do this exam, this geography exam. And I'm like, oh, well, I suppose I'll go do the exam. So I sat down for the exam, and I'm starting writing away all this nonsense. And the head of geography comes over, and he says, excuse me, you're in the wrong place. And I said, no, I'm not. I'm here for geography. And he said, well, no, yeah, this is geography, but no, you're not a geography student, so I'm afraid you're in the wrong place. You'll have to go. And I said, no, I am a geography student. Honestly, I'm here to do a geography exam. And he's going, no, you're not a geography student, because I take all the lectures, and I do all of the classes and all of the homework sessions and all of the tutorials. and I know all of my students, and you're not one of my students, so you're not a geography. You're in the wrong place. And so I said, no, sorry, mate, I am. I'm here to do geography. And he said, so what was your name again? I said, it's Iain Baker. So he ran over and went, and he obviously checked this piece of paper, and I could see him the other side of the room checking this piece of paper, going. And he comes over to me, and he was like, "Where the hell have you been? Where the hell have you been for a year?" And I'm like, "Mate, I'm sorry." So, and strangely enough, I failed that exam.
Do you speak any Latin at all?
A little, yeah, a little, yeah. It's a dead language, so it's difficult to, there is no Latin word for microwave oven, all of that sort of stuff. But I can quote Latin poetry, multas per gentes et multas per aequora vectus, all of that sort of stuff. I'm fairly versant in that, which is weird, for somebody who's been in a rock band for 35 years. The ability to quote Latin it's a party trick, I suppose. It doesn't really get you. It's not useful.
It's funny because my kids' school, they're actually starting to go back to Latin next year.
I will say, it's a massively, massively useful subject. It's like learning. Yeah, okay, it's a dead language, but it's like learning. If you learn Latin, it doesn't teach you necessarily about Latin in itself, but it teaches you how to learn, because Latin as a language isn't like English. If you say in English, I went out of the door and down the road, everything follows in an order of words. You know what I mean? Like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That's how the words work. You know what I mean? Whereas when you do Latin, it could be, door, out, I went, road, then, whatever. Everything's in this strange, different order. And when you read things, it's like solving a strange kind of puzzle, and it teaches you to be quite lateral in the way that you approach language, in the way that you approach and translate it back into English. And I found that approach to learning Latin made me think about not just Latin in that lateral way, but everything in that lateral way. I started to think about other subjects, not just in a linear fashion, but in this weird jumbled up way. And it taught me to be creative and inquisitive, and it taught me to ask questions and to expand my mind and to keep thinking all the time. So even if I didn't come out of it being the world's greatest Latin student, I think it gave me so many lessons. I learned more from Latin than I learned from maths, and everybody does maths and what have you. How many times have I applied what I've learned in school classrooms about maths over the past 25 years? Not many. All that algebra and stuff that I learned. How many times have I used it? Like virtually never. But the way that I learned Latin and the way it taught me to be, inquisitive, those lessons, they come up every single damn day.
Okay. All right. Now, the name of the band, Jesus Jones. I have a theory on this, so bear with me.
Okay.
I think
I'm always up for hearing the theory. Come on, Britt, hit me with it. I think
the original reason for the band's name was to symbolize a rebirth of things extrapolated onto then contemporary England, with the commonality of the surname Jones just representing most of the populace. And then the story about a bunch of Joneses sitting on a beach surrounded by guys named Jesus, which is a sweet cover story for the very conservative American audience. So firstly, what is the real story behind the band's name? It's one of my favorite band names, by the way. And secondly, did you run into any resistance getting airplay in America with the name of the
band? I don't know. Okay, I'll do the second part first. No, we've never had any problems with the name, and I think that is so. The second part is due to the first part, and the first part of where we got the name from, why we got the name, is there is absolutely no reason behind it at all. All of those stories we've said in the press and everything we've ever said, all the reasons, There is no reason behind it at all. So I think if we'd have had Jesus in mind, if we even had somebody called Jesus in mind when we called the band what we called them, if we'd have actually been thinking of the Jesus at that time, then there would have been some way in which we'd have been referring to Jesus. Religion would have played some minor part in it, and then people would have been able to say that we were being disrespectful, and they'd have been perhaps right to say that if that had been on our mind when we called ourselves Jesus Jones. But it never was the reason why we called ourselves that. And I think because we had no, therefore, connection to the name and connecting it out to anything else, then we've never had any problem with it. But the real reason why we called ourselves Jesus Jones is, kind of, it's a bit of a rebirth, but it was a rebirth of the band. The band at that point had been through a couple of different iterations. Mike, the singer, and Jen, the drummer, had been in a band ever since they were kids, since they were like 14 or 15 years old. In heavy metal bands, they all just sounded like AC/DC. And then they'd been in a band with Alan, the bass player, for a number of years as well. And they had been called The Big Color. They were called Camouflage for a while. They'd done that thing of like starting out, let's see if we can get gigs, let's see if we can get big, let's see if we can break through. Nothing happened. And because it was all just going nowhere, they thought to themselves, well, we have to do something. Let's tear it all down and start back up again. And if you're going to tear it down and start back up again, the easiest way to start back up again is start from scratch and just have a new name. So they needed a new name, which is where Jesus Jones come in. And at that time, it literally was, I think they looked around and saw that there were some other bands called Jesus. We had the Jesus and Mary Chain, maybe the Jesus Lizard, something like that. And there were a few bands who had similar sorts of names. And I think it was the guitarist who said, well, if there's loads of other bands who've got the word Jesus in the title, it's kind of hip. And maybe they'd sit up and take notice and maybe confuse you for somebody a little bit more successful. And everybody thought that was actually quite a good idea, rather than a name that people just instantly forget. Even if they confuse you with somebody more successful than you are and you're not successful, there's got to be a start. So they said, okay, well, maybe if we just put Jesus in the name somewhere, that'll do. And they said, well, we've got to use something with it. And the real reason why we're called Jesus Jones is just because it's two words that begin with the letter J, JJ, Jesus Jones. And also because it trips off the tongue quite easily. It flows, da, 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 Jesus Jones, da, da, da.
Right,
and that's, I'd love to say there was a reason behind it. I'd love to say it was, it had massive importance and all the rest of it, but it really doesn't. But I like that because it means it has no prior history. It's just us. We made it what it is. It allows you to, because we started from the beginning with it,
Right, it had a ring to it, like
somebody just said it had a ring to it. It's absolutely, that's all it was. It's important. You've got to be when you sit down and have that discussion. When you're sitting around with a beer and you're thinking, and you're talking to each other for the first time, thinking, "What on earth are we going to call her?" It has to have, like that person said, like it has to have a ring. You've got to be able to stand up there and tell people, girls are going to come up and say, "What's your band called?" And you've got to be able to say, with a straight face and with a degree of pride, we are called this. You've got to be able to back it up. And it was just one of those things, because it had a ring to it. We thought, yeah, it'll work. And it did.
And Jamie, to piggyback on that, what was some of the challenges that when you guys first started getting off that were stuck out to you? Were there any like really big challenges that you didn't anticipate?
When we were starting out, the biggest challenges, I suppose, really were, and this is going to sound maybe a little bit big-headed, but were people people just didn't really know how to deal with us at all. Because we formed in August or September of 1988, and by like 4 months later, 4 or 5 months later, we had a single in the charts over here in the UK. I mean, it happened lightning fast. And one of the challenges of that is that it turns your life around in a lot of ways, and you aren't particularly well prepared for that. And also because what we were doing was different from what a lot of other people were doing. We were sort of mashing up rock music and dance music in a way that people wouldn't have expected a bunch of kids like us to do. And that meant that people didn't really understand how to deal with us. In a sense, they still don't. You know, we were a rock band using samples, and a lot of people still, when they hear elements of sequencing and samples and synthesizers and things in there, they say, well, you must have been lip syncing, or you must have used a backing track, or weren't you guys miming? And we've had that for 35 years. So that's been a challenge, trying to, you know, people's perception of you is a challenge. Dealing with that is a challenge. Trying to tell people that no, we're doing things a different way. And also we were using computers to make rock music. And now that is the most natural thing in the world. If you're a kid and you've got like a doom metal band, you know, you play black metal or doom metal, or you play folk, or you play, I don't know, polka music, whatever it is, you use a computer to put it all together. And it's the most natural thing in the world for kids to do that, you know, as it should be. But back then, if we were using, you know, computers and samplers to make music, and people just looked at us and said, well, so you're making dance music, or you just make dance music? Well, no, we can use it to make rock music. And we literally, every interview, we had to try and explain that we weren't making dance music just because we're using computers. Now, of course, that's totally different. If you went to a folk musician now and said, but you've made all your demos on a laptop, how come it's not dance music? Well, of course it isn't dance music. You can listen to it and hear it isn't dance music. But back then it was really difficult trying to make that distinction. So I think that was a challenge in and of itself, trying to deal with that. You know, so a lot of the things that we faced were those, you know, problems of perceptions, people not quite getting it. But then again, you turn that around and you make it an advantage for you. So if people don't really understand you and they start, as it were, fighting back, then you fight back harder, and you think to yourselves, well, we have to prove ourselves. And we've always had that. We've always had that thing of let's see if we can be better. Let's see if we can do better, because we have to show people that why we do what we do. So that, in a sense, every challenge that you face, every hurdle that you face, forces you to try and jump over that hurdle. Do you see what I'm saying? And every you know, every challenge that life throws at you, the hurdles get bigger, but the power that you need to jump over that hurdle gets bigger too. So it forces yourself to keep challenging yourself to be a better person. So yeah, challenges can be tough for a band, but you've got to be able to turn that round and use it to your advantage.
They can. All right, Miss Piggy says, in the early years, did you get the opportunity to work with Duran Duran at all?
Oh man, I would have loved to work with Duran Duran. Oh, I love Duran. Duran Duran are the band I've seen probably more than any other. I just loved them. I saw them on the I remember seeing them on the Rio tour, the gig that's you can buy the DVD of that gig, and I was in the audience for that at the Hammersmith Odeon in 81 or 82 when they put Rio out. And they were just on fire. Like, seeing a band of that at that point in their career was just amazing. I've seen them on so many other tours. I saw them on the Big Thing tour, on the Notorious tour, Seven and the Ragged Tiger tour. What else? And then a bunch of other out tours as well. So including when they did the Thank You album. I saw that. And then they did an acoustic tour of the States, much the same time as we were touring. So I remember seeing them somewhere in California when they were doing small venues and doing acoustic versions of that. And that was just, oh man, that was marvelous. But yeah, to answer that, that's a very long-winded way of saying, no, we didn't work with Duran, but yeah, I would have loved it.
All right, we got a running joke question on this show. Beatles or Queen? Who do you got out of those two bands?
Beatles or Queen? Queen, maybe, actually. I love Queen. I think,
Great band, right? What a great band.
Yeah. But that's not to say that I'm making comparisons really between the Beatles and Queen themselves. Because for me, the question has always been never the Beatles and everybody else. It's been the Beatles or the Beach Boys. Those were the kind of that's the top two. When people say, oh, it's the Beatles and the Stones, it's never been that way. It's always been the Beatles or the Beach Boys for me. Those two acts, because they both have very similar career paths. They start out doing quite basic rock and roll, everything like Surfing USA versus, Love Me Do. It's very simplistic. Twist and Shout and Surfing USA, those are similar sorts of records. And then if you look the way that they develop, by the time of the Beatles are doing Revolver, the Beach Boys putting out the album Beach Boys Today, by the time the Beatles are doing Sgt. Pepper, the Beach Boys are doing Pet Sounds.
Oh, I love Pet Sounds. What a great album.
The careers are both like this. They're both very, very similar, a similar arc. And I've always had that thing, and I've always come down on the Beach Boys side, perhaps not the Beatles side. I love the Beach Boys so much. So that's where I stand on that Beatles thing. It's more because I love the Beach Boys. But having said that, going back to the question, Queen, yes, definitely. I was listening the other day to what was I listening to? We Are the Champions. I mean, and that's one of those singles which is almost overplayed. You hear it everywhere and everybody knows it. And it's just, a single like that you can take for granted because you've heard it X many millions of times. And
it's like that. But then when your team, like when the Cavs won that title in 2016, and that was the first time in my life, and I'm in my 40s now, first time in my life, and I'm really into sports. Like I'm a sports addict. You can tell by my background, everything I talk about. When they won that, I played that song nonstop that next day. That bar opened 11:30. I was up there playing. Oh, it was a blast. That part of the song will never get old.
I listened to it the other day for the first time in a while. I listened to it on headphones and really listened to it. Like dived into it and shut the world out and listened to it. And it's an incredible piece of music. I mean, all right, it's something that we know and we almost take for granted, but I dived into it and I'm like, this is genius. It is absolute genius. So yeah, Queen for sure.
All right, we're getting into now the smash hit right here, right now. Is it true that you had no idea it was going to be a success? And how successful do you think would have been without like MTV in the push? And JV piggybacks on that by saying, how can you tell us how that song was written and recorded?
Yeah, absolutely. We had no idea that it was going to be successful. When it was demoed, Mike sent demos out to all the rest of the band. And I remember he sent one to Alan, the bass player, and Alan was like, God, that's awful. He was like, no, I hate that. Don't like that at all. How it was written and recorded. I mean, it's funny. It was, I'm sitting here just like in a little bedroom thing. It was written in a room like this in Mike's house in West London in 1990. And it's a proper bedroom song. It was written in Mike's bedroom. So there's a bedroom down one side of the room. There's a kind of chest of drawers on the other side with a computer on the top of it. And then there's a little low table which had a ghetto blaster and some tapes and other bits and bobs and an 8-track recording studio, a little portable cassette recording studio. And because everything was on cassettes, some of the samples for the initial thing that we sampled, that we ended up replacing, everything was done on tape. So it was incredibly lo-fi. So some of the breaks and the beats that we used. I mean, Mike at the time used to record things by playing songs onto the on his ghetto blaster and holding a microphone in front of the speaker and tape and using that as a sample, you know, pressing play on the tape and like, all right, waiting for somebody, you know what I mean? Waiting for somebody to stop flushing the toilet and then pressing record. So it was really, really lo-fi. And I think the glory of Right Here, Right Now is some of those real immediate lo-fi elements clash with the fact that it is a classically well-written song. If you listen to it in the way it's structured, the way it runs from verse to chorus to verse to middle eight, etc., it's classically written and it's really well written. It's got good bones, as they say, you know, for a song. And I think that's what's ensured its longevity, because it's so the sounds still remain fresh, and yet the bones of it feel old and classic.
Heck yeah. Ready, set. My buddy Ready to Hit Hot Fire says, Right Here, Right Now came on when I decided to not fear my illness and fight back. Thanks. My sister had it on the radio when she was bringing me home. Good stuff, man. Good stuff.
Oh man, it's amazing. I mean, the thing is, I'm constantly amazed by how it affects people, how many people know it, and how many people just dig the song. It's just amazing to me to think that, you know, and it's something which has sustained us as a band for so long. It's enabled us to carry on doing what we do. You know, just this one song that a guy wrote in his bedroom in North London in 1990, you know, sat on the corner of his bed writing this song. I remember going in the day afterwards and him playing me the first little bits and bobs of, he was like, oh, I've got this tune, I've got this, I've done that. And when you extrapolate out all the things that just that one moment of creativity can do, it's just mind-boggling. And like you said, that quote there from somebody that it has a personal connection to somebody's life, you know, it's affected somebody's life. You can't help but be humbled by that. That's just amazing, you know. It's just amazing. I mean, I'm thankful for it, for myself, for what it's done for me. But there's somebody who, you know, it's done something for them too. You know, how can I not be just blown away by that? You know, that's the coolest thing in the world.
Speaking of coolest things in the world, Captain Bampton says, where had the best groupies?
I don't know about the best groupies. We were always a little bit, we're nice boys from London, you know. We were always a little bit like, oh my God, what are these people doing? But I remember the, I think Texas was the place where the groupies were the most forward. You know, that was the place where they were the most kind of, what's the word? Militant. You know, they were quite militant in their kind of, right, watch out, we're coming for you. Yeah, we were in a venue. We'd played in Texas. It was Deep Ellum, I think we played in Texas, or Fitzgerald's that we played in Texas, which I think is in Houston. Anyway, we were upstairs, and the security guy comes upstairs, and the security guy says, "Hey, when are you guys going to finish talking and just come downstairs? I got these girls here that want to do the band." And we were like, "What the hell?" You know, and seriously, you know, yeah. Okay, listeners, they did not do us in any way, but we were just terrified by that. I mean, Christ, we ran a mile. That was just like, to us, that's kind of scary. Yeah, we were hiding under tables at that point. Have they gone? Where are those crazy girls that want to do the band? Have they left? Yeah, that was quite scary for us, you know.
That's awesome. All right, JV has a question. What age did you start playing piano keyboard, and what is your favorite model keyboards you've had and used over the years?
I started when I was about 8 or 9 years old. I don't particularly have a favorite type of keyboards. I mean, I'm not a great keyboard player. I love to play the piano, and I love to play the piano, but I don't particularly have a favorite piano. You know, as long as it's a nice heavily weighted keyboard and it sounds good, that's good by me. Having said that, you know, you can't knock playing a really nice grand piano. It's just amazing. A Steinway or a Bosendorfer or a Bluthner piano. And I've never had enough money to own one. But anytime I go somewhere, you go to, and it's always recording studios. You go to recording studios and they've got a piano in the corner. You're like, oh, I've got to have a go. Got to have a go. And you can just daydream about, you know, owning a house that would be big enough to put like a giant grand piano in. That would be cool.
We had a piano when we moved in here, but it was like a little dilapidated, and I played it for a little bit, but after a while, it was just like the thing just got run down. And to move a piano out of a house is a whole ball of wax. That back thing that like the keys are and the whole metal contraption, that thing's got to weigh like 400 pounds, dude.
It weighs so much, you know. And for the you know, imagine trying to get like a grand piano into a house. It's just, you have to have a crane to lift it in, because you can forget about walking that up a set of stairs. It's insane.
Right?
They're seriously heavy. But yeah, I mean, I love them. It's kind of a love-hate thing with me, you know, keyboards. I do it. I'm not brilliant at it, and I wish I was better, but I do love playing them.
Yeah. All right. Now you got the MTV Video Music Awards 1991 for Best New Band, and the song went platinum. Now, first off, do you have any of these awards still? Do you have like a trophy room or something like that?
Yeah, I'm really gutted actually that we're not upstairs. I'm downstairs. Upstairs, the Moon Man's upstairs. Let's do another interview and I'll bring the Moon Man down. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, the Moon Man's upstairs. I still have the Moon Man. I think we've all got our Moon Men. And then I've got some of the platinum discs and the gold discs and what have you. My parents have got some and I've got some. I gave some to my parents and I kept some. But we have a little office upstairs and that's where the stuff sits. So it's not really like I'm showing it off around the house all the time. It just sits in the office because the office is the sort of hub of the music room. That's why my wife works from home and she works in the music industry too. So it's full of music stuff and music memorabilia.
Now, is there any one particular award that you take most pride in, or are they all just kind of whatever after you get so many of them?
I think the MTV one is a big one for me. I mean, that was amazing, and also it didn't feel. In a way, it almost felt like we didn't really deserve it. I was just like, wow, how on earth have we won this? You know, and it's weird that it's when I say that I didn't think we deserved it, that I don't mean that we didn't deserve it because we weren't any good. I still think we were a good band and we are a good band. But winning Best New Artist is, to me, just felt insane because I knew how many other new bands there were. You know, at that time I was going to gigs and seeing bands, seeing loads of other new bands. I knew people who were in bands who were starting out. And I just, as soon as I got on that stage to accept an award for Best New Band, I just felt the weight of all those other hundreds of thousands of new bands behind me, you know, you can't help sort of metaphorically looking over your shoulder and thinking, well, what the hell makes me so damn good, you know, ahead of all those other bands, you know, because I knew so many people that were brilliant too. And you think, do I really deserve it? So, but as the years have gone on, you know, I realized sort of what an honor it was to be given an award like that. And yeah, so that has a big, important thing for me. We got nominated for a Grammy actually as well. And we didn't win any Grammys, but we got nominated for a Grammy. And I've got you get a medal, a little Grammy medal on a ribbon. And that's a buzz too, because MTV is sort of within the MTV world, but a Grammy feels like it's bigger somehow. You know, right. Grammy's everything. So, and the Grammys was like that. When you go to the Grammys, it isn't just music business people; it's everybody people. You know, there's actors and there's, you know, people from all types of media, and it feels like a really big deal. So that's quite, you know, that has a special part in my life as well.
Nice. I got a question from Jamie C. He says, were you ever a fan of the Happy Mondays?
Yeah, I love the Happy Mondays. Love the Mondays. Crazy. Damn, they were crazy. We played with the Mondays once or twice. Once in Boston, actually. I think at the Orpheum. I think it was the Orpheum in Boston, and that must have been in 1991. And I think 1991 wasn't a good year for the Happy Mondays. I think that was just in between Pills, Thrills, and Bellyaches, and when they were about to go to Barbados to do Yes Please. And I'm not sure if they had the crack habit at that point, but I suspect they may have done. And if they didn't have the crack habit, they possibly had the heroin habit, and they were in a mess, or they were just in a total mess at that point. But they're total rock stars as well. I mean, absolute rock stars. And, you know, they were just endlessly entertaining. Watching them play live, it was like a force of nature. And we supported them very early on in their career at this place called Dingwalls in North London. And then seeing them on a small stage was just brilliant. And this is a pretentious thing to say, but it was like watching, I don't know, it was like watching a jazz artist or something, or it was like watching free jazz in some way, because what the Happy Mondays didn't go down the same routes that traditional rock bands did. It was just mad ideas popping off all over the place, just like like Miles Davis would play the trumpet and just notes would come in from all over the place, and you'd be like, what the hell is going on? And it's the same thing when the Mondays were going on. It was this controlled chaos, and I love watching that. You know, when you're watching something and you think it's going to fall over and it's going to catch fire and it's going to explode in the next 10 seconds, and it doesn't, and you think, well, how the hell is it not doing that? And you're amazed and horrified, and you can't stop watching, and it's exciting at the same time. It's a trip. Do you know what I mean? And watching the Happy Mondays back then was a trip. They were just amazing.
Okay.
Yeah, still love them. Still love them.
All right, what do you think about when former President Bill Clinton used your guys' song on the campaign trail? Was that something you guys were like, whatever, or was it kind of like,
okay? Yeah, we were like, excuse me. Yeah. And then Hillary used it as well. I mean, Bill used it, and then Hillary used it in 2007. And I've said this in an interview before. I was like, do they only have one CD in their car? Is that only one album they've ever listened to as a couple, both of them? It's like, what should we use as a theme tune? Well, the only record we ever listened to is Jesus Jones. Let's just use that. So yeah, it did freak us out a little bit. I think we didn't get, but the management got, they got an official fax, because that's how you did things back then, by fax. You know, he said they got a fax about it, and it came. I like to say it came from the FBI, but I don't know. It came from, I don't know, the CIA or the State Department or the FBI or somebody, like, you know. So there's some pretty serious headed notepaper chewed out of this fax machine saying that that Bill Clinton was going to be using this song, or was thinking of using it, or it got down to the final couple of songs, and they sent us this notification that it was going to be used. And in the end, they went and basically used Fleetwood Mac and said "Don't Stop" became the overall tune that everybody remembers from his presidential campaign. So we were sort of relegated at that point. But, you know, and I don't, you know, it doesn't really make any difference. I didn't feel sad that we'd been relegated, or I didn't feel like, oh, damn, Fleetwood Mac won and we didn't, you know. At that point, the whole thing is just so bizarre that you don't really know what to think. And I still don't particularly know what to think. I think some of that is because it's American politics. And as somebody from England, I mean, yes, you follow it in a certain sense, but I don't have those political affiliations, and I don't feel that I should have those political affiliations to America. It would be wrong for me to say, well, I like it because of this or because of that, or I don't like it because of this or because of that. You know, that's your guys' politics. But it's weird. So we were very much, you know, onlookers from a long, long way away, and we lacked the sort of context to be able to really decipher what on earth was going on with it. It was just something really weird was happening, and we were in the middle of it somehow.
Outstanding. Now, speaking of 1992, I screenshotted this screen of you and Mike. You guys did an interview with John Norris. All right.
Oh yeah, I remember. Oh yeah.
I need you to explain this hat, and also, do you like these couch show style interviews? What's up with the hat, and do you like the couches? What do you think?
Oh man, I know that hat. I love that hat. That's so cool. It just pointed straight up, like proper, like a gnome hat. Check that hat. That is that's a majestic hat. I'm not here to take anybody else's criticism. That is a majestic hat.
Beautiful.
I look like a dork wearing that, don't I? I seriously look like a dork. But, hey, I was young. I was young. I was probably drunk. What are you going to do? I was young. I was drunk. I was on MTV. You're going to wear a pointy hat, aren't you? Surely you're going to wear a pointy hat. We did a lot of those sofa interviews, and they're all fun actually. And being on MTV was just amazing. Every time you go on MTV, you wanted to pinch yourself. Wow, we're on MTV. MTV is one of the weirdest things, like trying to explain MTV to people now. Yeah, they used to play music on MTV. They used to play videos on MTV. Yeah, all the time. Music videos. I mean, wow. Go figure. They don't really anymore, do they? So it's not what it used to be. MTV was such a big thing back then.
You ain't lying. Oh, back in the I grew up in the 80s. So I remember when barely remember when it first started. But we used to just wait for the premieres to come out, and then if we saw like, oh, Warren has a new tape or whatever, and then we'd go buy the tape. I mean, it was just it was the portal before the internet to all the music. I think the internet kind of killed MTV and music.
It's weird that you use the word portal, because that's absolutely the word I was going to use, because when we started touring the world, so the moment that we, for the first 6-8 months of our careers, we would play the UK and Europe, and then after that we would go, out of Europe off to various different countries, and you'd land in all these places where you didn't know how they talked, you didn't know any of the language. And the first thing we always did was just went into the hotel room, switch on the TV, and just go click, 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 MTV. And then at least you got something you can watch in the room. And, you go to the guitarist's room, he's got MTV on the TV. Go to the singer's room, he's watching MTV. It was just that it placed you back in contact with the world. It felt like, MTV was something which, when they had the spinning world logo, and it was something which brought the world together through the power of music. In a pre-internet world, it functioned like the internet. That's the only way I can explain it.
Okay. All right, we got a question from JB. It says, since Jesus Jones' early days, how has the changing music industry affected artists and the creative process?
It's incredibly different. I can't even tell you how insanely different it is. It has affected the creative process, because in the past, of course, what would happen is you'd have a record label who'd be supplying you with enough money to live on. They'd be signing you to a deal which would require you to record records over a scheduled contract. You have one album that's out this year, and then we expect another album to be delivered, etc., etc. So there was a schedule to your creativity. And you look at bands, even people like, people who are perhaps above that, money game, people like David Bowie, but they still put out albums regularly all the time. And that's because you're in this music industry thing. And the music industry really isn't like that at all now. Essentially so many artists function as their own little industry, which means that they can create things on their own terms and at their own time. So, that question says, well, how things have changed creatively. I think that really does explain why you have certain acts that will record constantly and do things all the time, and there's a new single on Spotify every few months. And there's other acts for whom maybe their lives so busy that they don't have the time to do that creativity all the time. And there are definitely bands out there who will record an album every 5 or 10 years. So my answer to that question is it allows artists to be as creative as they want to be when they want to be creative. That's how it's changed things. It's put control back in the hands of the artist, and that it could be a good thing and it could be a bad thing.
Amen. All right. Andrew says, is it time for the Stones to call it a career? I'd say yes.
I don't know, really. I mean, I'm more proud of them for keeping going. You know, I mean, here's us in our 50s, you know, and we're still going. And, you know, if somebody had asked me in my 20s, you know, you still gonna be doing this when you're late 50s, I'd have been like, nah, you're kidding me. I don't know with the Stones. I mean, some of the Stones is dependent on what their records sound like as well. And sometimes I think that the Stones records haven't been quite as good to be able to back up the immense sort of vibe that they can do when they're doing live sets. I'd like them to be able to do that as well. It's a difficult question for me. I don't know when bands should give up, but I always think they should give up when they feel that the creativity has left them. And it's not kind of my place to determine when other acts feel that way. You know, I don't know. It's tricky for me to say.
That's fine. All right. Captain says, what modern bands do you rate?
What modern bands do you rate? Oh, man. I don't listen to as much modern music as I used to, I must admit. I wish I did listen to kind of more stuff. I listen to a lot of dance music, a lot of drum and bass, a lot of hip hop, a lot of house, a lot of techno. Not so many sort of new bands in a sense. But then again, there are other bands that are still going, that still record, you know, that I think put new music out all the time and are still brilliant, you know. So I listen to, there's a band called Wire, kind of punk new wave legends. Wire, every time they put an album out, they just get better and better. They're as good as they were in 1978, which I find impossible to understand, but at the same time, that's very inspiring for me, that bands can still be great 3 or 4 decades later. So, and that's new music from them, you know. Is it modern? I don't really know. I listen to but a lot of things that I've listened, I'm trying to think what I've listened to this year that's been brilliant. The last the last Danger Mouse album was amazing. I like the last Caroline Polachek record. I thought was just awesome. I thought that was really inspiring too as well. The fact that it was just all over the place, but it still sounded just poppy and fantastic. There's a lot of stuff out there. You know, it's difficult though because there's almost too much stuff out there. You know, Spotify gives you loads of choice, but it's too much choice.
Oh, you got 8 bands in every city. I mean, for every, you know, band of the type, you could, cool, it's the computer and the internet. Anybody could do a talk show. Anybody could do a music label. I mean, it's the barrier to entry is absolutely nothing right now.
Of course. Yeah.
Bigger back on that. What bands, do any bands, or you guys just do your own style? Any bands fuel your guys' music or currently fuel your like?
Yeah, there's a few bands that totally fuel Jesus Jones. And I can let you into the secret. They are the Shaman. They are the Beatles, and they are AC/DC.
Oh, nice.
AC/DC probably more than anything else, which maybe people wouldn't get or understand, but AC/DC are at the heart of about 70% of whatever we've done ever. It's because Mike and Jen were like heavy metal kids when they were little, and like the first things Mike ever learned to play were, you know, AC/DC records, and that still stands. Everything that Mike wants to write is basically, he thinks to himself, well, would it sound good if it was played by AC/DC in 1978 around the time of Power Age? That's his yardstick. Would it sound good if this was a bonus track on Power Age? So yeah, AC/DC are at the heart of just about everything. The Beatles so it's AC/DC for the riffs, the Beatles for the melodies, specifically probably the White Album. and then a band like the Shaman for the way that they the very early on the Shaman, before when they were still integrating beats into quite psychedelic traditional rock indie music, whatever, so that's massively important. And then also possibly Public Enemy, but in a sort of tangential way, so not necessarily straight Public Enemy, but Public Enemy in the way that they used the first few albums had a production team called the Bomb Squad, making their beats and their backing tracks, and the way that the Bomb Squad used sound to create those early PE backing tracks. We tried to emulate that. I don't think we ever succeeded, but we would listen to those backing tracks and think, we want to at least try and approximate some of that vibe, the way that they're putting that urgency and that insanity and that intensity into the tunes. That's what we want to try and emulate. So it's a mixture of those things.
Heck yeah. All right, JB says, what DAW or software do you use to produce demos, arrangements, and songs from?
Cubase. It's always Cubase. We use Cubase ever since right since the start. Since Right Here Right Now was recorded on, I don't know, Cubase 3 or whatever it was in 1989. Back when we were using it was recorded on an Atari. I think it was like 1024, an Atari 1024 with a little red dongle that you had to plug in the side, so you could use Cubase. Otherwise, you had to buy a cracked copy, and it wouldn't work properly. And then we just carried on using Cubase. So that, yeah, we still use it.
Nice. Now, sometime in the mid 2000s, your song just came everywhere in American advertising. Like you heard it, Kmart commercials and all kinds of stuff.
Yep.
Now, is there something? Does your production company handle that? Or do you guys just get random emails for something like that? And have you ever been out in public and you just heard the song and it's like a moment of pride? Or just kind of like hope nobody notices you? Or what's up with that?
I don't think I've ever been out and heard it in the wild like that, but you can take it from me that literally I get so many messages from, just about anybody. They'll, members of your family or friends or whatever. I'll just get a text from random text from people saying, I just heard it in Walmart, or I just heard it on a radio, or I just said it. And that happens like 3 or 4 times a day, or it seems like it does. And yes, we do get random emails from people saying, I'd like to use your song here, there, and everywhere, which is great and amazing. Yes. And the record companies are there to handle all that sort of stuff. So they tend to work out the deals, and it's not like somebody rings me up and says, we got all this money, we want to use it. Somebody else handles the dirty business side of that sort of side of the equation. But it does happen still, which I am quite flabbergasted by that it's happening after 35 years later.
It's crazy, right?
Yeah, it is. It's totally crazy.
Situation. Speaking of iconic, you guys are heading out on a North American tour this summer. Now, what decided you get the band back in the States and have fun with it?
What decided to get, well, because we love the States. I mean, we've been to the States so many times that we were, as soon as we started playing again, we were like, we've got to see if we can get back to the States somehow. Got to see if we can do it. And it did take us a while to organize that, because touring the US isn't an easy thing. It's expensive. The visa fees are just crazy. Since COVID, everything is now way, way more expensive than it was. So trying to do that was it's an enormous logistical headache. But yeah, we had to come back. We had so much fun touring the States back in the day. Every time we played in the States, it's been amazing. We're coming back to Cleveland.
I was just going to say, I checked the schedule. You guys don't have much free time. You start in like June 29th, and you're in Cleveland here on July 30th.
And then we're gone.
The place called the Music Factory, I think. Now, I got a story about, it's called the Music Box. Now I got a story about this place, because this place used to be called Club 1148. It's a nightclub. It's right in the water, right in the Cuyahoga River.
Yep.
And back in I think it was like 97 or 98, I was at Club 1148. And I had just turned 21, and I had 2 guys with me, and they were both like not 21. Like I think the one guy was like 19, the other guy was like 20, something like that. And we did a couple shots, and the bouncer came up and said, "Oh, that guy's too young. You got to get kicked out of here." So he booted us, and I was fucking lit, dude. So we we get in the car, we tried to drive, and I ended up getting a flat tire. So I'm sitting here like drunk as hell trying to change the flat tire. The damn car jack fall. This is a Ford Aerostar I had back at the time. I rolled deep. So the Ford Aerostar falls over, and so we couldn't get the flat on. So I just said, fuck it, I put the regular tire on, and I just drove to a side street and passed out. And then my buddies just took off. They didn't stay the night, but yeah, so that's the history of that club for me. But you're gonna love that venue, man. It's right on the water. Oh, short.
And now I'm gonna force you to go back.
I was just gonna get into that. Now, if I go down there, can I get a picture with you and say high five?
Yeah, of course you can. Perfect. Come down. You know where I am. Send me a message. Come down. I'll get you on the list.
And if you come down, if you're into the weed, I got you. I'm the weed guy. If you need the hookup.
Hey, we can't talk about that stuff, can we?
I don't care. Nobody's listening anyways, right?
So yeah, we're good boys. We're good boys. And what was I going to say? Yeah, we've had some great times in Cleveland. We played the Agora, which was amazing. I'm trying to think the other place we played, and I can't even remember the other place that we played in Cleveland. We played a couple of times. It was brilliant. Yeah, the Agora Ballroom. That was just fantastic. So yeah, we get to come back to Cleveland. We go to Chicago. We go to, we're going up to Toronto, New York. We're doing most of the East Coast and the Midwest, and then maybe we're going to try and come back early next year and do the West Coast.
I was going to ask you, is the Midwest just because it's convenient and there's a lot of cities here and that was easier to do logistically?
Yeah, convenience is a part of it for sure. It's difficult and it's expensive. It's logistically tricky to get a band to come over there and play. So if we were to do some of it now, some of it later, it just makes our life a little bit easier. And that's the thinking behind it. Let's try and get some of it done now, some of it done later. Simply.
This is a good question to wrap kind of things up. As you reflect on your career, what is something you are most proud of in your career with Jesus Jones?
I know I've said the Moon Man. I still think that's a cool thing. I want a Moon Man. That's awesome. Yeah. And just little things like we like getting number one singles or whatever. That's pretty cool. But I think above and beyond that, just the fact. The thing I am most proud of is the thing that it is 2023, okay, and I can sit and talk to you on the internet, and we can shoot the shit for an hour about a band that I joined 35 years ago. That's my proudest achievement. How can you not be proud of that? The fact that something that I started doing 35 years ago is still going, and it's still going strong-ish, enough for me to get on a plane and come and be able to, next time I see you, I'll see you in Cleveland. How cool is that? It's just, to me, that is an achievement, and it's something I am proud of, but it's also something that I am humbled by, and something that I find just, quite overwhelmingly inspiring that, people can do something like that and it can change their lives. But it can change their lives constantly. It still stays with me, and I think that's the coolest thing. It really is.
Okay. Is there anybody touring with you? Who are you guys on tour with?
Yeah, some friends of mine from Chicago. They're in a band called Discoveries of the American Scientific. So they're supporting us. They're great friends of mine. And they're a really cool band. I love them. And they're going to be backing us up and helping us tour around the country. So they'll be playing with us in Cleveland and at the other shows as well. Good
stuff. So July 3rd, that's a great date. I'll tell you why. Because July 4th, obviously, is a holiday. So everybody can go out to Club. I can't remember the freaking name. It's still Club 1148. It's always going to be Club 1148 to me. It's
a Music Box. I think it's called Music Box.
Music Box. Yeah, it's going to be right to Music Box. So check it out. I'm going to try to get down there. I've seen nothing else going on that weekend, because I get off.
Send me a message, man. You know where I am. Send me a message.
I will do, sir. I will do. And thanks for Mr. Iain Baker for coming out. Like I said, you catch him on tour. He's going to Minneapolis. There's Chicago in there, Milwaukee. He ends up in the Big Apple. It's going to be a banger tour. He's going to have a good time, man. Appreciate you coming on, my friend.
It's been a pleasure. Talk to you later, man. Take care.
All right, we'll see you.